Okay, this video is really to give you an overview of the way in which there were different, if you like, segments, different parts, what are referred to as different theatres where the Second World War played out, different regions. We've already dealt with the idea that the Nazis led to a war of annihilation on the Jews and a war of conquest, the Second World War. What we're now grappling with is the idea that World War II, the Second World War itself, had different regional aspects that played out in different ways, and they are referred to as the three theatres of the Second World War. So when we're talking about the Second World War, in this unit we're particularly interested in the Pacific War. But firstly, there's a European theatre. It had two fronts, the Western Front and the Eastern Front. Often the Eastern Front is referred to as the Russian Front, and it's essentially the European theatre is where the Allies were fighting against Hitler and the Nazis. So on the Western Front, it was Britain, the United States, their allies, including the Free French and the Canadians and so on. In the Eastern Front, on the Russian Front, with the Soviet Union and its allies fighting against the Germans. The second theatre, the Mediterranean theatre, between 1941 and 1945, had three fronts, and these were in the Balkans, around the areas of Yugoslavia. Then it was in the areas of Greece and the Mediterranean islands, islands such as Crete. It also played out in North Africa and the Middle East between 1941 and 43. And then there was an Italian campaign after the Americans had landed in Sicily and the British had landed in Sicily, and then at Anzio in Italy, what became known as the Italian Front between 1943 and 1945. Now, the Australians played some part in this Mediterranean theatre. They were involved in the Greek campaign of 1941, which was a massive defeat at the hands of the Nazis and the Italians, and then they played a part in the North African campaigns in locations like Tobruk and El Alamein, where they fought against the Nazis and the Italians in North Africa. At this stage of the war, in 1941, towards the end of 1941, there's a dispute between the British and the Australian governments, as the Australian government want to withdraw the Australian Imperial Force, the volunteers of the Second World War, the second AIF. They want to bring them back to help in the defence of Australia. And that's something we're going to grapple with in this unit. That links nicely to our Asian and Pacific theatre. There's two regions here really rather than fronts. Front sort of implies a line of fighting, and that just isn't the case in an area with a lot of ocean. So one region in which there was fighting was mainland Asia, in locations such as Burma, in locations such as China. But there's also a Pacific, if you like, region of operations. There's a Pacific theatre. Now, the leaders of each of these three countries cooperated together in the war. Germany, Italy, and Japan become known as the Axis powers, as if the axis on which a circle revolves or a wheel revolves, a center point from which everything revolves. So the leader of Nazi Germany, as we know, is Hitler. The leader of fascist Italy, and that is a fascist, a bundle of sticks with a axe sticking out of the middle of it. The idea that many sticks bound together is strong, and the axe is a symbol of power, ancient Roman symbols, the fascists, okay, and the fascist party were led by Benito Mussolini. There's a picture of him there, and here's a picture of him with Hitler. In the Pacific, we have the Japanese Prime Minister, a general of a militarist regime, not a political party, Hideki Tojo. Tojo is taken prisoner at the end of the Second World War. He's put on trial by the Australians for war crimes. So we've got three theatres of operations in the Second World War. The Australians were involved in all of them at some point in the war. They fought in the European theatre as part of the RAAF, fighting in the air against the Germans right till the end of the war from 1939-40 onwards. They fought on the ground as part of the AIF in first the Greek campaign, the Balkan campaign, and then North Africa. And then for much of the war, the bit we're concerned about, they're involved in the Pacific theatre in the war against Imperial Japan and Hideki Tojo's Imperial Japanese Army.